Hello and welcome to this shortened version of the June Functional Forum, the Evolution of Neurology, that we filmed at the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual international conference in Los Angeles, California. Now, for this special shortened version, we're going to bring you exclusive footage from our Wednesday night pre-party, where we welcome some of the luminaries in functional medicine to a party that the Evolution of Medicine put on, and we're going to show you some of the footage from that event, featuring people like Dr. Terry Walls, Dr. Maya Shetreat-Klein, one of the conference keynotes, Dr. Dale Bredesen. It was an amazing evening. We had some incredible guests, food and drink, and great to celebrate with the tribe. Here's some of the highlights from that special event. Enjoy. For those people who aren't totally familiar with your work, can you give sort of like a high-level overview of what you've been able to do with your protocol and your research?
Right. So we've been interested for 30 years now in what is it that actually drives Alzheimer's disease. You know, we were told that Alzheimer's disease is mysterious, you can't prevent it, you can't delay it, and you can't reverse it. Well, the problem is that people have not looked at large enough data sets. So we're looking at all of the reasons, and this fits beautifully what we've been doing in the test tubes for 30 years, studying Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's, our fruit fly model, all these other models. I have to say, I didn't think I would ever get back to seeing a human being again. But studying these things, what we found is that you can actually look, if you take the right series of genetic and biochemical tests, you can see why you are having cognitive decline that we call Alzheimer's disease. Immediately what you can see is Alzheimer's is not one disease. You can see very clear subtypes. So we developed an algorithm where you can now say this person has 70% type 1, 20% type 1.5, and 10% type 2, for example, or type 3, 4, 5, etc. So we can see very clear subtypes, and then you can see what to do about it. And so we started this back in 2011. We actually proposed the first comprehensive trial for early Alzheimer's, which was going to be done in Australia. And we were turned down. They said, look, you obviously don't understand how to do clinical trials because you're asking to change more than one variable. We said to the IRB, well, you obviously don't understand Alzheimer's disease because it's not a one variable disease. So we are all doing things, and they fit very much within the functional medicine realm, that contribute. And we identified initially 36 different things that all contribute to the molecular pathways that lead to what we ultimately, the pathologists really call it Alzheimer's disease. But it is cognitive decline associated with a specific pathology. So we told people, look, imagine you have 36 holes in your roof. You take a drug, it covers one hole. It covers it really well, but it's only one hole. You got 35 left. You're going to have a problem. So we started telling people, look, you need to do all the holes. And when they do that, we saw unprecedented improvements, reversals in cognitive decline. We published the first 19. We have several hundred people now who are on this with unprecedented improvements, and we get these. We've had over 5,000 emails. We hear from people every week who are getting better. And what we found is that what we're doing fits in beautifully with what functional medicine is all about. So we found out what we're doing fits in beautifully with what Jeffrey and Mark and David and Sarah and all the various people who've been working all these years in functional medicine have the right approach that fits beautifully with what we've seen in the test tube over the last year.
I want to just go into that for a moment, because you've got the functional medicine community here. You've got doctors like Markman Alice Eno. You've got Rongan, I know, has been out to train with you and to understand what's really going on. What is it about a functional medicine doctor that makes them uniquely equipped to deliver this kind of care?
Yeah, and you mentioned Markman Alice Eno is a very good example. So Mark, when he's looking at what is actually causing it, he's not saying the way, if you go to an Alzheimer's clinic, what they will tell you is, you have Alzheimer's, we don't know what causes it, and it's not going to get better. We're going to give you a drug, Aricept or Namenda, which is going to make a very, very small difference, but doesn't change the trajectory. You may get a bump up, you'll continue down. When Mark sees someone, when functional physicians see someone who have cognitive decline, they do appropriate tests that are actually focused on the biochemistry of what's driving it. So instead of saying you have Alzheimer's disease, 21st century medicine is saying you have type 1.5 MCI, for example, due to specific genetics, maybe due to your HLA-DRDQ interacting with a specific mycotoxin exposure. You can see all the players, so you can actually get at the root cause. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Why would you try to trick nature and go downstream with a drug? We know it doesn't work. Monotherapies for complex chronic illnesses do not work. So one of the things we're really interested in is essentially bridging what we call the complexity gap. Think about it for a minute. I don't know if anyone came here in a driverless car or flew here in an airplane, the computer flies the airplane, drives the car. Any sort of task, your iPhone, any of these things do. You have to match the complexity of the computer program with the complexity of the task. It's only in medicine where we have these unbelievably complex systems. Humans are incredibly complex. The genome, 3.3 billion base pairs, is just the tip of the iceberg. That's the simplest part. The lipidome, the proteome, the metabolome, on and on and on. So you have this incredibly complex organism. And what sort of a data set do we gather? Sodium, potassium, a couple of things. So there's this huge complexity gap which doesn't exist anyplace else. If you tried to fly a plane and you had that little information, you'd crash every time. So the goal here is to develop better and better algorithms so that we can say, look, here's why you got this problem, be it type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, congestive heart failure, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body, what have you, and we're just starting to go from Alzheimer's to some of these others. And then you can get at what the actual causes are. And it just happens, it fits beautifully with what the pioneers like Jeffrey and Mark and others have put together over the last 25 years.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I guess, the last question that I want to ask, this show is called The Evolution of Neurology.
Yeah.
So in your mind, what is the evolution of neurology?
Right. So to me, this is a really exciting time. And it's hard to realize that when you're in the middle of it. I don't know how many people here went into neurology, but the fact of the matter is, you remember making fun of the people who are interested in neurology when we were in medical school. Why? Because we're really good at diagnostics and we're really lousy at therapeutics. So as they say, the national flower of the neurologist is the hedge. So, this is, right, And so neurologists are known for pontificating, but not helping anybody. This has been the problem. This is why I went into the laboratory for all those years. But for the first time, we can actually make a difference. And so this is the era. I mean, again, it's so hard to see when you're in the middle of history. We are in, literally, neurologically speaking, we are in the fourth inning of a perfect game. So all of us are part of history. It's a part of history of functional medicine. This is a real revolution. When have we ever been able to reverse cognitive decline in Alzheimer's before? When have we ever been able to do that? Lou Gehrig's is next, and on and on and on. So, yeah. So this is we are all in the middle of a historical event that is going to be taking place over the last few years and the next couple of decades. And we will all emerge from that, where Alzheimer's will be and it should be, a very, very rare disease.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Dale Bredesen. So as part of the conference, we caught up with one of the speakers, Dr. Markman Alice Eno. He is a functional medicine doctor from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he was sharing on the stage a number of case studies and protocols to make it easy for you to replicate the work of Dr. Bredesen and others at home. Check out my interview with Dr. Markman Alice Eno. So we just heard from Dr. Bredesen about the potential to reverse MCI and Alzheimer's using some of these protocols. You've been doing this on the front lines for more than a decade. What does it take to deliver these kind of results in clinical practice?
The first thing is to actually do the right testing. Dale and I talk about the 36 holes in the roof. There's probably between 70 and 80 of them total, not 2,000 or 3,000. But you've got to fix all of the holes. And what we find is you get most of them fixed, the rest of them slam shut. So whether you have one hole with the right patch, you've got to get them all fixed. So the real key is you've got to get the right initial testing. We were taught in medical school, James, that you do a CBC, a chemistry, a thyroid test, a B12, and an MRI, and you call it good. Why would you not look at the metabolomics, the microbiome, the detoxification pathways, the hormone imbalances, the nutrient deficiencies, all of the things we know in functional medicine you have to look at to get a personalized precision assessment of that unique bioterrain of the individual. Now that we've applied that functional medicine lens to cognitive decline, we now have a roadmap of how to shift these people out of cognitive impairment. The other key to this is really having a collaborative care team. We're taught medicine to do it all ourselves as a physician, but when you add a nutritionist, a health coach, and bring in a team approach and a collaborative care type model, then you have the energy of the entire team, you enlist the family, you enlist the caregivers, and you really have a much more model that's going to shift them out of illness into wellness.
Yeah, one of the things that you shared in your talk, which I thought was really powerful, giving the two examples of the two patients where one of them had the buy-in from the family and one didn't. What sort of difference does that make overall, and what are some of the strategies that you can use to engage the whole ecosystem around the patient?
One thing we've learned is that the caregiver burden of someone taking care of a patient with cognitive decline, taking care of someone with cognitive decline actually causes cognitive decline. The high cortisol, the high stress actually does damage to the hippocampus memory area of the brain. So when we share that burden with an entire group in a collaborative care, we enlist the partner, we enlist the family, we enlist my collaborative care team, then we're able to share that burden through everyone. When we find that we have the entire model set with that collaborative care, then we can actually get a difference in their outcome. Whereas when we have one person try to do it, the burden is so high, and the amount of things that we want to do on a day-to-day basis and be able to track those changes is just difficult to do by yourself. Yeah. And I really think the future of all of functional medicine, and particularly of reversing cognitive decline, is going to be able to put this together in a model where we have that burden shared by multiple people.
So maybe you could give us an example. I know you gave a lot of case studies during your talk here, but of a case where you were able to sort of facilitate this kind of transformation and what that looks like, just to give people an idea at home, like what's actually going on.
Well, we look at people through this lens of the subtypes. The first subtype is inflammatory. The second type is atrophic, or lack of hormone and vitamin D support. The third type is a toxic or heavy metal type of insult. And once we're able to categorize people on that basis, then we can develop the lab testing program that hones in on exactly what those deficiencies or imbalances are. Once we identify the hormone imbalance, we identify the toxic insults, we identify the imbalances, we're able to address them in a logical order that helps to shift them out of that subtype. And at every visit, we have to see them on a regular basis to try to see where those markers are moving and to try to stay ahead of the progress of those.
Yeah, and so what in your experience, is there one of those subtypes that's sort of easier to make progress on?
Well, in functional medicine, we're really good at inflammation. Okay. So the first subtype, the inflammatory subtype, is really the easiest to shift. We're really putting out the fire. And that's something that functional medicine practitioners are excellent at doing, using targeted nutrition, using food plans like the Mito food plan from IFM, and using targeted supplements to calm that fire down. That's really where the low-hanging fruit is.
Absolutely. And so with some of these more complex ones, let's say the heavy metal one where there's a lot of burden, is it a standard detoxification protocol, or are there other things that you're having to do to take into account that you're dealing with a really sensitive area of the body?
I think it takes both. And a lot of times when we get the bioterrain fixed, when we get the gut healthy and we get the liver detoxifying, the body will let go of some of those heavy metals. Yeah. It depends on the genetic basis that each person has, but if we get the bioterrain laid out and we get the gut healthy, the body will start to let go of some of those biotoxins that it's holding. And that's really the key, is to try to get all of it in balance so the body can do it on itself rather than try to aggressively push it out.
Yeah, it's working with the body rather than than fighting it. You know, I've heard quite a lot of inspiring stories over this conference of people that have been interacting with neurodegenerative disease, and treating neurodegenerative disease has taught them things about the body that they've been able to take. I know you're kind of a generalist and you do see a lot of these cases. What have you learned from neurodegenerative disease that you can take into clinical practice with other kinds of cases?
Well, in a way, they're all the same. Is that when we address the body in this precision, personalized way and look at the matrix, particularly the bottom of the matrix with the lifestyle choices, and we address the body through all of these different components, Whether it's neurodegenerative disease, whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's diabetes, there are a lot of the same models.
Yeah.
And it's really that lens is finally being applied to cognitive decline. And so looking at those imbalances is really the key, and having a starting point to allow the body to work with you, not against you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like functional medicine is is well set up to be able to deliver on this, because you're going to go through that same process whichever you go. You know, we've done this event called the Evolution of Neurology. We've done the Evolution of Psychiatry and Oncology and Cardiology, and there is a common theme to all of this: is like treat the cause, get the lifestyle right, and all those kind of things. What are your thoughts of on how we can facilitate great health for everyone?
Well, I think the key to the future of chronic illness is functional medicine, and it's going to be delivered in this collaborative care model that we're talking about, where you really have ownership by not just the physician and the collaborative care team, but by the patient. And the successes we've seen in neurodegenerative illnesses is when there's been ownership by the client and by the family and by the caregivers. It's amazing to see people shift and to see them become self-empowered when they learn about what their body can actually do. Our job as doctors is to obtain information, to empower these people with knowledge, to help them make behavioral changes that fit their belief system on their terms. Once we meet people in that space and we share with them the tools that can actually get them from point A to point B, and they see the success, they're willing to go to the next level. And that's the relationship, that therapeutic partnership, that really functional medicine does the best.
And what tips do you have for practitioners who are dealing with patients where the mild cognitive impairment is leading to problems with, let's say, patient compliance?
I think that's probably the toughest part in all of medicine is patient compliance. A lot of times, by the time a patient finds a functional medicine doctor, they've been through so many other physicians and not gotten the care that they're looking for or the answers they're looking for, or they've heard about functional medicine, or they've had success with a family or a friend and seen the power that functional medicine can be for these exact illnesses.
Yeah.
And so by having that awareness and then having the tools to give them the empowerment to do it for themselves, it's such a beautiful thing to watch, because as they get better, the people around them get better, and it's kind of a 1 + 1 = 10.
Absolutely. And what do you think of the potential of some of the new emerging models? You mentioned, nutritionists and health coaches. Do you think there's a potential for group dynamics in the future of Alzheimer's care and neurology?
Absolutely. When I worked with Dean Ornish 20 years ago, we saw that in the Reversing Heart Disease program, the most power was the group support we did each week.
Yeah.
And in those groups, when those couples went and did more on their own, in the subgroup analysis, those are the people that did the best. So there's something about the social support, the group support, that works really well. I think the delivery of group visits is really one of the futures of cost-effective healthcare, particularly for chronic illness like a neurodegenerative disease. The support that you get, the information that they share, it really is a cost-effective, time-effective way to get a lot of people to shift together and to encourage them to do it on their own. The work that Mark Hyman did with the Saddleback Church is such a testament to that. And we have multiple groups that work like that to help each other be more successful. They learn from each other, they teach each other, they support each other, and they empower each other. It's really a beautiful thing to watch.
That is amazing. I guess one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, obviously there's people like Dr. Terry Walls who have just had like a total transformation, and we've heard from other people here who've been, doing that same kind of thing. How do you modulate expectations with patients about what's going to actually be possible for them?
I think it's on an individual basis, James, that we always want to have hope, but we don't want to have any false expectation. Everybody is an N of one, and they're all a unique individual. But I do think seeing some of these successes, if you don't start from the point of having the hope and having the optimism and the positivity, it's kind of a synergy to the actual treatment, that they really work hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you don't have the optimism and the hope, you could have the best therapy not work. You could have a therapy that's not quite optimal, but with the love and the support and the hope, you get a better outcome with it. And so we see those go hand in hand.
Beautiful. I know you've been faculty on the training that Dr. Bredesen's been doing for the Institute for Functional Medicine. What's it been like being on sort of the other side and teaching clinicians to replicate this kind of work?
Our best training we had was in March at Huntington Beach, and we had 350 of our IFM practitioners that were there. And it was a very solid group, so we were able to teach at a higher level than we were able to for beginner classes. At the beginning of the 3-day conference, it was 18 hours that we did teaching, we asked if people thought reversing cognitive decline was possible. It was kind of a quiet few hands that went up. At the end of the weekend, we asked the question again. There was a roar in the crowd. So when people see this whole model laid out and see these cases and see these outcomes, they see the power of using that functional medicine lens applied to this condition, and all things are possible.
Beautiful. You heard it here first. All things are possible. Mark, thanks for being on the front line all this time.
Pleasure,
Appreciate
James.
you sharing all your insight with us.
Thank you very much.
So one of the hottest topics in brain health is epigenetics, and we were very excited to dive in deeper to that conversation with Dr. Cara Fitzgerald, and she talked to us a little bit about the role of brain health and methylation, which is a hot topic in functional medicine. It was a really interesting conversation, and here are the highlights.
Absolutely.
So one of my main responsibilities at the IFM conference is running the product theatre, and did it last year and be doing it this year. You know, we have been transitioning away from having sponsors on the functional forum, mainly just because we found that if you were a practitioner that wanted to introduce these kind of technologies into your practice, you needed a little bit more help, and that's why we created the Practice Accelerator. Now, you've heard from practitioners over the weekend that in order to pull off this type of medicine with this type of population who has mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's, you need to take best advantage of the best practices for patient compliance, and that's heavy use of coaching and technology. And so if you're realizing that your practice is inefficient or you don't have the compliance structures to be able to help people between their visits with technology and coaching, that's where the Practice Accelerator can come in. We have 500 of doctors and practitioners from around the world who want to be on the cutting edge of creating these new models, taking best advantage of technology. If you are interested in building an efficient practice, if you want to get better at patient compliance, if you want to create a more stable practice and a more functional practice, come and check out the Practice Accelerator, www.goevomed.com/accelerator. It is the only practice management company that's endorsed by the Institute for Functional Medicine. We've been signing people up here, and we'd love to have you join our community. Check it out at the link below. So this has been a really inspiring conference, but one thing I think we all have to face with neurodegenerative disease is that it can be a very depressing topic. And one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do in the last few years is to meet people who, as a result of a neurodegenerative disease, have changed their life completely. And these stories are really inspiring and really powerful. And so we want to share some of these stories with you, both from the event that we did on the night before the Functional Forum, the live event, and also from at the conference. So here are a few stories from people in the ecosystem whose lives have been transformed by neurodegenerative disease and are living big and doing amazing things in the world. I think you'll really appreciate it. Enjoy. So I want to introduce you to 2 or 3 people tonight, maybe 4, maybe 5, whose lives have changed as a result of a neurodegenerative disease and have changed their life for the benefit of themselves and for mankind. So first up, the unstoppable Dr. Terry Walls.
All right, we'll see if this is still working. So 10 years ago, I thought I knew what life had in store for me. I had progressive MS. I could not stand. I'd struggled to walk 10 feet. I could not sit up. I had a tilt recline wheelchair. I was beginning to have a lot of problems with brain fog. I was losing my keys, my phone. I had to replace my phone 3 times, my smart keys 3 times. I had intractable occipital neuralgia that was getting more and more difficult to control. I needed to take Solumedrol and pain clinic injections. I was now up to 5 days of Solumedrol. And life was very, very grim. That summer, I'd been experimenting with supplements. I had been following the paleo diet that had slowed my decline, but I was still declining. I then discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I took that course on neuroprotection, which, by the way, is really tough when you have brain fog. And I had a longer list of supplements that I added. I also discovered electrical stimulation of muscles, and I started doing that, which, by the way, hurts like hell. But I had completely accepted that there was no recovery possible with progressive MS. And so I was going to do everything that I possibly could, which included stimulating my muscles with current enough that I was sweating from pain. While I was doing that, an hour on and then an hour off, and an hour on, an hour off, through all of my waking time. And then I had this big aha moment where I redesigned my diet with these supplements in mind to refocus my paleo diet, as you guys will hear about the Magic 9. And then, to my surprise, I could sit up. And then, to my surprise, I could walk with a cane, and then I could walk without a cane. And you know, one of the things that happens when you have progressive MS is you just take one day at a time. And so I was taking one day at a time. I'm walking around the block, still taking life one day at a time. And I decided to ride my bike. And I'm able to ride my... I can ride my bike around the block. I'm crying, my kids are crying, my wife is crying. And that's when hope came back into my life. Because it's like, clearly my neurologist has no idea, conventional medicine has no idea, and who knows what might be possible with progressive MS. Maybe I really could recover. And of course, I would then go on to bike 20 miles a few months later, and I continue to recover, and I change how I practice medicine, and then my chair of medicine calls me and says, you got to do a case report, so I salute and do the case report, and then he calls me back and says, now I want you to change the focus of your research, which had been studying secondary data analysis and diagnostic error, and he said, I'll help you get some clinical mentors. You're going to start testing whether or not your protocol can help others with progressive MS. And so we got that going, and somehow I managed to get the funding, and I'll be showing you guys these amazing videos. And so that all began 10 years ago when I thought I understood what my life was going to be. But as it turned out, that was the most powerful gift I've ever been given, because I had to get that disabled to be willing to relearn all that basic science and relearn everything and re-understand what is possible and re-understand how to take care of people and reimagine my purpose in life. Now, my purpose in life is to tell people, if I can come back from being so disabled that I could not sit up, that was a struggle to walk, that I was having brain fog, that had intractable pain, to having a full and vigorous life where I'm not quite athletic, but biking 20 miles is not bad, that they could come back too. And so we see this in our clinics with Parkinson's, with early cognitive decline, with progressive MS, that we can, in fact, come back from amazing degrees of neurodegeneration, which I, 10 years ago, thought was only a one-way down. Now I'm busy telling people that, yes, you can repair your brain.
So when James asked me if I would come and speak here, he said, I think you should give a talk, The Future of Neurology is Female. And I was like, no, I wrote this book called The Dirt Cure. I'm going to say the future of neurology is like dirty. But I thought about it, and I actually realized that the two are really deeply connected. So really the future of neurology and our future is actually related to our connection to nature and to, Mother Earth. And I think that what we've been trying to do is tame and control and suppress this kind of wild creative force. Because we're really scared of things that we can't control and things that are unpredictable. But actually, that wild force is what creates biodiversity, and that's what our bodies and our brains need to be healthy. So instead of considering ourselves as adversaries with adversaries against germs, against our disease, against our bodies, against nature, what we really want to do is consider ourselves as allies with the natural world. And so a few of the things that I looked at to talk about, well, what is the future of neurology and how is it related to, dirt and the planet, were something like psychobiotics, right, which are now very big. So looking at things like organisms that come from the soil, like Mycobacterium vaccae, which are actually changing appetite or circadian rhythm or cognition and making people smarter, making people calmer, and making people less anxious and sleep better and all of those things. Another thing is actually things like cannabis and psilocybins, that we're looking at all these plants that we thought were bad, we thought we needed to control, and it turns out that cannabis is not only treating things like intractable seizures and spasticity in MS, but also we're learning now that it's reducing deaths from drug overdose, right? I don't know if everyone's seen that, but opiate overdose has gone down by 33% in states that legalize cannabis. That's huge. And So, and psilocybins, we're learning, can treat things like PTSD and OCD, and there are a lot of studies going on in academic centers now that are looking at these, what we consider to be drugs and illegal, and we should, separate ourselves from them, and it turns out that they're really therapeutic and medicinal because, when they're used properly, we really have the opportunity to heal. And then finally, we don't have to just use things that are controversial, but I think the future of neurology is really also in nature because we're learning that thing. Who's heard of forest bathing? Anybody? So in Japan, there's this concept of Shinrin-yoku, which you go immerse yourself in the beauty of the forest. And it turns out that reduces your cortisol levels, it reduces your inflammation, it boosts your anti-cancer proteins and your natural killer cells. It makes you sleep better, it improves your executive function. I don't really know of any drug out there that can do that, but go out and hang out in the forest, hug a tree, sit on the ground, pick up some dirt, and actually I think that's really the future of neurology and of our health.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the session from our pre-party. If you haven't watched the whole conference, go over to our YouTube channel and check out the full extended version of the June Functional Forum, The Evolution of Neurology, featuring Dr. Cara Fitzgerald, Dr. Markman Alice Eno, and many, many others of the practitioner community. It was such a pleasure to be here in Los Angeles at the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual international conference. Our next event is Journey 100 on June the 30th, 2017. You can watch the whole event, an all-day event, on our YouTube channel and on the Functional Forum. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.